Hello and welcome to the Meeting Goal podcast. My name is Samuel Mealy, your host. Once again, thank you for joining us on another episode. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, a guy who's killing it on social media, just got in the market as a real estate agent, but has a very, very interesting past, which he was telling me about in the before the podcast started. But we'll get into it. All right, Jake, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from? Give us the rundown there.
Awesome. So first off, you guys watching this, Sam, make sure you're following everything this guy's doing because he's thinking about stuff the right way. Okay,
Thank you, man.
Yeah, and I mean it, man. I'm excited to get into today's conversation because I've spent a lot of time. You don't even know all the things we're going to talk about today. So,
love it.
So one of the big things is from a young age, I've always believed in the idea of networking. Mm-hmm. So what you're doing right now is brilliant because one of the first really entrepreneurial things I did was I started a podcast.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding. I started a podcast and it's called Novel Podcast, and then I changed it into the Jake Nicolle Podcast.
Okay.
I have done hundreds of podcasts. So I share that to say what Sam's doing, take note of it, pay attention to it, listen to it because it's really smart.
Thank
the
you.
fact that you're at the age that you are, it's brilliant, man. You're super bright young guy.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks.
So when it comes to what I do, I started out very entrepreneurially, but I was mostly a musician. I was a touring drummer.
You were saying that, so tell the audience a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started out touring professionally, and I realized really quick, as much fun as it was to be a touring drummer, it had ups and downs. So I got to do the whole traveling to Amsterdam and getting to travel all through the States. But the problem is you're always on somebody else's schedule. So you don't exactly get to decide when you're going to do sightseeing or touring and getting to have fun. It's a lot of work.
Right.
And that's all okay, but I really quickly realized if I want to be able to have a family and know that I'll be around, I'm not going to be able to do that through touring. So I created something called 180 Drums, which is online drum lessons. I still own that business today. And at the beginning of this year, after about 6-7 years of operation, I bought a magazine that I grew up reading as a kid. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we could dive into there. We could talk about micro acquisitions and how to buy companies, how to think about this idea of, which is going to be a huge trend, people buying businesses rather than starting them. Mark my words, give about 3 to 5 years, it'll be a massive trend.
And you know what? There could literally be, we'll film something else just for fun because there could be a whole other podcast just on that. Let's touch on that. Because I was going to say is, there's venture capitalists who invest in companies just starting out. But what's such to me is an underrated job. I mean, you got to be really good at it. But starting businesses for a living. 2 to 3 years, you grind out, you start a business, get it to where its proof of income is over $100, $150, maybe $200,000 a year in revenue, and net income, hopefully $100,000, right?
Yep.
You can sell that business for anywhere from $100, $200, maybe even $300,000 clean. That's profit. And you could do that once a year, right? And you constantly start these businesses and you run them, and then you sell, you build it up. I mean, that's an underrated market within itself. It's complicated, but you could hit gold one time and be set, right?
Absolutely. We could take this show in so many different directions.
Yeah.
So what I'll say to kind of cap off my background and my experience, because I love what we're talking about, and I could, I'm a huge Berkshire Hathaway fan, and I've read all the books on Buffett, on Munger. Tiny Andrew Wilkinson out in Victoria is somebody to pay close attention to. Very intelligently, they've named themselves the Berkshire of the internet. So they buy and hold internet-based businesses, and that was a huge inspiration for myself going out and buying Drum Magazine. So today, I own those businesses. I also created a training company that I put just under 100 small business owners through, where it was a very intensive 50-hour training that teaches you how to clarify who your niche is, who is the market that you're solving a problem for, what's the problem you're solving, how do you then create a really clear funnel online and advertise to that. So that's a business that I also own. And then today, getting into real estate is something that I'm excited about because it's the first time I've been able to think 10 years into the future.
Interesting.
Online businesses, it's really hard to think more than a couple of years into the future because you don't know where things are going to go. You don't know what the audience might have going on in terms of other offers or options. So there's a bit of a background. Last thing I'll share is about 3 years ago, I helped a company called Success Resources launch a podcast in Australia. Now, Success Resources are the guys that do all the events for Richard Branson, Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, like a huge list of A-list people. So if you were to go onto iTunes and search up the Success Resources podcast, you'll see my name as the host of that. I helped launch that. We've got a whole bunch of interviews with Tony, with Gary, with all these.
Have you talked to them personally?
So when we did those, I was the guy that kicked off the show, got it all set up, and met those guys at events. I've got pictures with all those guys, which is awesome. For that, they had the CEO of Success Resources do those interviews.
Of course, yeah.
Which is awesome because he actually had a relationship. Otherwise, it would be me sitting there trying not to fanboy Tony.
Yeah, I don't blame you, man.
All these guys.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear from a young age. How old are you now?
So I'm 30 as of like a month ago.
I would have passed you like early 20s, like one of those guys that are just like, that just have made it by the time they're like 22, 23 or something like that. But
wasn't me.
Hey, you know what though? It seems like from an early age, you just had an entrepreneurial spirit, you know, starting 10 years old, I could probably say, just guessing, right? And whatever that looked like, whether it was a big money maker or not, it was learning the process of running, owning, buying, involving yourself, managing businesses constantly. And clearly for you, that's been a process for now, what, 20 years probably? 20 years?
You know what's crazy, man? So I want to tell you, Sam, it's really funny because a lot of people have amazing stories. You're, for sure, one of those guys who has stories of being probably 10 years old selling lemonade. Yeah. I was actually not that guy.
Really?
Yeah, I was not that guy. I was the wanting to be a pro skateboarder, going out and being absolutely obsessed and one-track minded at I'm going to be the best skateboarder possible, and had offers from Volcom early on to be sponsored. Like I was hardcore into that. And then I got hurt in grade 7. I was a little kid, got hurt on a half pipe. And on the way back from the hospital, I told my mom, how am I going to support a family with being a pro skateboarder?
Okay, whoa.
Yeah.
A kid in grade 7 doesn't ask that question, though.
Absolutely.
You're undermining yourself here.
Yes.
Nobody asks those questions in grade 7.
Yeah, it's true. And this is the hint of entrepreneurial endeavors.
Interesting.
But it was more of a mindset, I would say, that I shared. Yeah. I don't think that I was a young dude going, okay, I'm going to like take over the world of business. I was actually a young guy going, I'm going to be the best in the world at whatever I do. And it was skateboarding. And I'll tell you, in grade 7, I remember saying to my mom in the car back from the hospital, I can't believe that I've hurt myself doing this.
Right.
I can't see a future now in which that might not happen again. So I'll just have to be a professional drummer then and be the best in the world. And that was what I set my mind to, and I went and did that.
But you know what? You know what I find interesting, and it's something that I like to preach a lot to people, because I get a lot of people in my age group asking me, you know, hey, I want to start a business, or you know, or I'm mentoring them, trying to give them advice.
Sure.
And the biggest thing I will say is, I don't care what in the world you do, you just find one thing and you excel at it.
100%.
And for some reason, you understood that without anybody telling you. It just came naturally. Like, I'm going to be the best skateboarder. Well, crap, I got hurt. Okay, now I'm going to be the best drummer.
That's exactly right.
And you started that, and then you realized, I can't support a business this way. Okay, I'm going to be the best X, whatever. But it's that mindset that I think a lot of people don't have of excelling at one thing. You know, a lot of people like to call themselves entrepreneurs, right? And this is no hate to anybody. But you cannot call yourself an entrepreneur if you're doing 25 different things at once, running a bunch of different businesses financially that are bringing you next to nothing.
Yep.
And secondly, that are taking up way too much of your time and getting nothing in return. I'm not talking financially in that sense. I'm talking relationship-based. I'm talking your time being worth it. There's a whole bunch of different factors that make you an entrepreneur. And I think the biggest one is just being able to recognize when you want to pursue one thing and be as successful as possible as that one thing, right? And it's clear that you had that mindset. Did that come from anywhere?
Yeah, it definitely came from my mother. So my mom is somebody who was a fantastic person at a young age in advertising, which turned into being an artist. So I share some of those similarities of business, but also loving the artistic side of things.
Right.
And I've kind of had to find a place for the artistic side of me to live, to let the business side of me thrive.
Right.
Because I do believe exactly what you're saying, which is you've got to pick that thing for yourself, and then you've just got to go, how do I make this my life? How do I, when I'm eating lunch, I want to watch YouTube videos that further my understanding of that thing? Yeah. And you've just got to be all in and obsessed with it. That's not everybody's personality, but if that's the type of person you are, you're watching this, you're definitely that type of person.
Yeah.
Give yourself permission to have a little bit of an unbalanced life and going after the things that matter to you.
It's true. It's true. I to quick jump into that before we move on. When I started my business, I think the one thing that I underestimate within myself is that when I was eating cereal in the morning or when I was, about to go to bed at night, it was just something that I ingrained into myself. Don't watch, Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever video games you want to watch. Watch something that's going to benefit your understanding in this thing. And for me, I didn't understand cameras at all. I didn't understand aperture, shutter speed, ISO, none of it. And then I just kept watching videos and kept watching videos. And then I used that knowledge to put it onto cameras. And that can apply to anything, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
If you put in the time where most people won't, you're going to be better than most people, right? But moving along, keep it coming.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about my journey through thinking about entrepreneurship and really playing drums professionally, and I already told that story. And there were some other details in there. Like I had my first exit of a business. It wasn't a big exit by any means, but it was my first experience understanding how to position a company for an exit. It was kind of what you talked about. It was built up a business, had the cash flow, looked at going, how do we put a little multiple on this business and understand how to sell it? And that taught me a lot about buying my first business. So we talked about a ton of stuff, and we could take this a bunch of different ways. One of the things we talked about that's super cool is this idea of buying businesses. So buying businesses is a lot like buying a home from the standpoint of you can do something called the seller take back or seller financing, where you buy the business with some money down, you have the business owner finance the business to you, and you just got to make sure that you're pretty positive you can crank up the monthly income from that business to a level higher than what your payments would be on the business. And better yet, when you buy a business, you're buying it with some kind of multiple. So that multiple might be like we were talking about earlier. Maybe you've got a business that nets $100,000. A 3 times multiple is pretty normal. We're in a really frothy market where everybody's buying businesses, so that multiple becomes 4 or 5 times. Or we're talking about SaaS businesses where the multiples are on the monthly income. What's really cool is you can buy a business, you can change the model of that business. So let's say you bought a magazine business like I did, and then you turn that into a software type business where you have products that you're selling. Now you can sell it at a higher multiple because it falls into a different category of business. It's not a magazine business anymore. Now it's a online digital software business.
E-commerce.
E-commerce, absolutely. And there's higher multiples for e-commerce businesses than there are for magazines.
Wait, let me take a guess. Is it because there's less to take care of?
Not only do you have less hard costs, but investors, everybody has to put something into a category, into a bucket.
Right.
So you're definitely right. There's less hard costs. You get into things like shipping the product is easier, all those details around the product. At the end of the day, though, people like to throw everything into a bucket. So if you can change the bucket that your business is valued by, then you could buy something and in 10 months you could turn around and flip it and have a successful exit depending on what your goals are.
It's so true. It definitely takes a special person to do that. Now, let's kind of take what you just said and apply it to now your magazine business. So you bought a magazine business. Why? What was the reasoning of doing that?
Love it. So first off, I bought a magazine called Drum Magazine. You can go look it up, drummagazine.com.
We'll link it. Don't
absolutely.
worry.
Now, when I was a kid, so I was born in 91. So I turned 30 this year. When I was born, this magazine started. So it's a birth year business, which is super cool to be able to say that I own something that was started the year I was born.
That's crazy.
And this was one of the top magazines for 3 decades. For the last 30 years, it's been a magazine that people know, they love it, and they trust it.
Right.
And I couldn't build something in the next 5 years that has the amount of cachet and history that this brand has. So I was able to buy a business that was really struggling to go from physical magazines to digital, and I'm a digital guy. So I understand digital.
Right.
So when I bought the business, I also had what's called a tuck-in. I had another product that I could promote and advertise through. So you're asking why I bought the business. It was undervalued. It was heavily undervalued based on the fact that they were trying to make money off the business, still selling magazines and a little bit of advertising. I knew that I could flip the model of advertising that we were selling, and more importantly, I could generate more cash flow through the business by selling my other products that I had, which were drum lessons with like Drake's drummer and Ariana Grande's drummer.
And utilize those relationships as well.
And utilize the relationships. The fact that Drum Magazine right now we're ramping way up, like 250,000 drummers a month visit that website.
Holy
So
smokes.
you think about the amount of advertising dollars, you think about the amount of traffic that I can send to 180 Drums products, and it's just so cohesive. So all of that was super inspiring. The reason I decided to get into real estate was that I had bought a couple properties myself, had some very bad experiences. I just got out maybe 7 or 8 months ago of a lawsuit that took a full year, and I won't get into
issues?
that. I won't get into that entire story. But I share all that to say I really quickly realized I've got to go and get licensed myself, because I see the future of real estate, and I see the future of real estate from the perspective of owning a fund and going out and buying up commercial properties that are, multifamily properties.
Yep.
And I've got some friends that are doing that very intelligently. I know that boomers, there's a ton of money in the boomer market. Those people don't want to buy online businesses. Those people want solid assets that are made of bricks that they can go and touch.
And it's so true. I mean, from me personally, I would like to buy an online business because I think I can make a lot of money doing it. Sure. However, that's not everybody. And most people, like you said, everybody's different, right? So I think one way, e-commerce business, big time. That's a great investment if I know what I'm doing. But when it comes down to real estate, I don't know it as much. I don't trust it as much. But I feel like you said, people are more inclined to understand real estate now because they know that the market's ramping up. It's getting huge. A lot of people are understanding they need to buy more property. So they're willing to make the investment of their time to learn about real estate, right? And I think that's the one thing that I got to say, as I get older, I want to get more into purchasing, investing, doing some sort of partnerships with purchasing large acre properties, either building on them, flipping on them. I mean, there's this one company out in the States right now, a multi-billion-dollar company, Empire, I believe. They basically buy a huge plot of land, build 300-400 homes, either rent or sell them. And I mean, that's it. Now, the stress and everything behind that is nuts. And being a multi-billion-dollar corporation, you can do it, but it's very, very profitable. You have to build it up to that point. I think a big dream of mine is to do so, to build something where, like you said, you can buy large acre properties, commercial properties, and really turn them into something that's just going to constantly profit you every single month, cash flow, right? I mean, Grant Cardone says it. Says cash flow is king, right? Yeah, 10x if you agree, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. See, so what Grant understands that was a huge eye-opener for me is at the end of the day, banks love real estate. Mm-hmm. And when banks love something, you can gain leverage. Meaning you can be leveraged. And as soon as you can be leveraged, you will not find wealthy people who aren't leveraged. There's always the outliers. You could go, what about Bezos? What about such and such? I mean, even Bezos, he leveraged himself up on investor capital. Yep. And that's not quite the same, but we can go out and buy properties and have really low interest rates, know that property is going to be appreciating. Obviously, the market can change, things can happen, but leverage is the goal. And Cardone understands not only can he have leverage, but the way that he's thinking that's really smart is I'm going to buy up huge properties because then when I decide to sell, I'm slightly more liquid. I can, instead of having to go out and sell 50 properties, I can sell one property, get my cash out of it, or better yet, I can just refinance one property. Right. And for him, he's also going, whether it's a $100 million deal or a $10 million deal, it's the exact same amount of work. So why wouldn't I? It's the same amount of contracts. It's the same amount of conversations.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't think about it that way.
Why wouldn't I just go for the $100 million deal? And then when it's time to sell, I don't have 4 deals that I got to sell at this price point. I can just sell one deal.
No, I mean, you definitely make a good point. I mean, Grant Cardone, I would, there's mixed opinions on him all over the world, but when it comes down to real estate, I think he's hit it on the button, and you're right. I mean, banks do love real estate, right? It's something that it's funny because it's they are like society in a sense where it's they like feelable, touchable things that they can see that are valued and that they'll know always have value, right? They don't like risk. And real estate, to a lot of people, isn't risk. Granted, it still is risk. I mean, you just talked about a lawsuit that you had to go through. I'm sure that was, sleepless nights, everything.
Absolutely.
Money-wise, killed you probably. But at the same time, the investment there in the long term is beneficial, right? And the banks see that. They see the appreciation on the properties. It's valuable to everybody, right? Now, the amount of stress going through that, it's all it's tension, right? I mean, how much do you want to take on when it comes down to, okay, the more money you make basically is the more stress you're adding on, right? And then I guess if you want to expand, build a team, which I'm sure you have with the magazine company as well, I want to build a bigger team so I can really just lay out the stress as a blanket and, have people deal with it, controllably rather than it just being thrown on me, right? I want to get into that actually a little bit is building a team, because I mean, there's a lot of people that can try to run and be successful, but when it comes down to it, once you hit a certain point, there's only so much you can do, right? There's a lot you can teach. So talk a little bit about that, buying the business. What was the transition like with that team? I'm sure there was already a team there. Like, what was that kind of like, and what did it look like?
Yeah, I love this. And I'm glad that for the last 5 minutes we've got, this is a great thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to a team, I've built up teams in the past. I've had churn. I've had to deal with learning how to build a team, because that's actually a huge challenge of learning how to go about the process of putting the right team in place and building a team. And what we've mostly done is hire people in the Philippines and in Eastern Europe.
Interesting.
And the reason is when you're hiring someone in the Philippines, they get paid a really good salary compared to people who are nurses over there, right. Doctors even. They're making really good income.
So they're happy working there.
They're totally happy.
Right.
And on top of that, they're just as skilled as anybody in the West. You do have to deal with things like loyalty, because they can just disappear. There's all kinds of headaches you can deal with. But we've had an amazing time working with teams in the Philippines, and then we've got a guy over in Eastern Europe who has a bit of a more administrative demeanor. And I would say that's a little bit of a blanket statement, but it tends to be true from the people we've hired. So when it comes to building a team is leverage. And a team is just like we're talking about with money, having different ways that you can access leverage. A team is a way to access leverage over your time, because if any of you have read the E-Myth or you're students of Michael Gerber, you'll know that you can't be the everything person. You can't try to run the business wearing the CEO hat, the CFO hat, the CMO hat, and you're trying to do everything. That doesn't scale well. So you definitely want to be building a team. And I mean, we could talk about culture. We could talk about all kinds of different things around building a team. At the end of the day, you want to be able to delegate and be comfortable with someone doing something maybe 80% as well as you, but you can't expect it to be done exactly as well as you might like it.
It's true.
And if you want to be the perfectionist who holds on to the business, just know that you can do that. Your business is just never going to be as big as it could be.
You hit the nail on the head right there, because it's true. It's tough to trust your team, but if you can teach them and play to their strengths, to each person, individual person, it's advantageous to everybody, right? And you need everybody to be happy that are working with you, right? And I think that's the biggest thing is don't ever say somebody's working for you. Say they're working with you, because if they weren't there, you got to now take on their role, or spend more money, more time to find somebody else to take on their role. So they're working with you to help benefit the business. And it's a mindset to have, as a boss or as a team leader or whatever that looks like. Now, our time is already coming closer to where we have to cut it off. However, I want to ask you a couple more questions.
Love it.
You said that when it came down to real estate, it was easier to envision yourself 10 years from now. What does that look like 10 years from now? What does your life look like? Will you still own the magazine? Will you still be teaching drum lessons? Will you run both of those businesses, sell them off? I mean, I don't want to fill in the blanks here, so I'll let you do that. Go ahead.
Sure, awesome. When it comes to where things are headed, there's a bunch of stuff that are kind of already in the works with Drum and 180. But what I will say from a real estate perspective is when I was thinking 10 years in the future, I could see the process of becoming great as a solo agent, bringing on the whole $1 million real estate agent, bringing on an admin, a buyer's agent, scaling that way. But really, I see the future being multi-family properties where I can bring on investor capital. There's just so much money sitting around, whether it's our parents' generation or people that are a little bit younger that still have some money. They don't know how to invest their money. You watching this today, you might have a bit of an investment strategy. Most people don't. And they don't understand how compound interest works.
Or they think that they understand how investing works, right?
Absolutely. And I can think of myself and my own journey with learning how money really works and realizing that cash is trash. That's a huge pivotal turning point. of what happens to your money if you just leave it in a bank account. Why is it worth so much less in terms of its buying power? And then you've got to understand that capital has a cost. It's got an opportunity cost, so you want to put it to work for you. And the truth is, most people don't know where to put that money, or they're going to end up putting it into something where fees are going to kill them. So I just see the future for me being multifamily properties where I can help people invest their money knowing that, hey, I'm going to get a really good return on this. It's something that I can go, I can touch it and see it. It's real estate, I understand it. And I can be the person to say, hey, for the last 10 years, I've sold a ton of real estate. I understand the world. For the next 10 years, I'm going to be acquiring as much real estate as I can. And you can participate in that. So that's really the vision heading into the future for real estate.
Jake, I don't think you could have said it any better today, and I think we could really fill up SD cards, 30 years from now with conversation. But with that being said, we got to come to a close now. Me and Jake are going to continue our conversation later on. We're definitely going to do a part 2 of this if Jake's up for it.
Let's do it,
Hopefully he is. And we'll dive more in depth what buying businesses looks like. I mean, we really just scraped the surface today, but I don't think there's enough time to really go in depth, and I wanted to cover everything. I think we did. If you learned something, make sure to follow us, make sure to follow Jake. You can keep in touch with him. We'll link his Instagram in the bio as well. It'll be very interesting to kind of see how Jake, how it plays out for you, man, because I mean, you're so well diversified, it seems. You probably think it could be better diversified elsewhere, but I mean, hey, you know what? You're a lot of steps ahead of everybody else who's 30, right? So I think it's very interesting to see how you've diversified yourself. And I mean, I think myself and hopefully people listening are really curious to see how that looks like as well. So we'll be sure to follow your journey on, Instagram or wherever that looks like. Jake, is there anything you want to say to the audience before we take off today?
Yeah, last thing that I would say is make sure you follow everything that Sam's doing. Pay close attention to the fact that he's doing something really smart, which is your net worth is totally determined by your network. And the idea is so cliche, but it's so true. The older I've gotten, the more I've realized that at the end of the day, the money doesn't matter. The people in your life are what matter.
100%.
And if you just focus on the people and use the good old-fashioned Zig Ziglar quote, of if you want to get everything you want in life, the only thing you need to do is help everybody around you get everything they want. That's absolutely the truth. And just don't be out there to get stuff. Be out there to serve people, and the rest will work itself out.
I could not agree more. Jake, thank you so much, brother. Guys, listen to the podcast. You can listen to it on YouTube. We also have it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify as well. And then we also have some cool teasers that Jake might post, I might post as well on the Meeting Gold page. So be sure to check those out. Thank you so much for listening, especially to the audio. If you've stuck this far, whether you're in the car or not, we appreciate it. Stay tuned. Next week, we have some great guests. We're actually filming 2 podcasts, and we got a good lineup of some guests coming up, Jake included, man. So listen, stay tuned. We really appreciate you listening, and we'll see you guys later. Jake, thank you.
Thanks, guys.